I'd like to thank the Tri-State Freethinkers for having me. I'd specifically like to thank Jim, Elena, and Jen for helping me with getting things together and coming up here. Like you said, my name's Monica Burns. I am the chapter founder of Black Nonbelievers of Louisville, and I am the co-organizer with Donnie Atkins. I'm also a member of the Louisville Atheists and Freethinkers group. And I'd like to talk with you a little bit today about why black people are so religious. I tend to get that question, and I've heard it from black and white atheists as to why, given the history of black people and slavery given to them by their white oppressors, why would they still be in that faith? And then I'd also like to talk about why black non-believers as opposed to just non-believers. I tend to get that question. Why separate off? Why make the specification? I actually think that those two things are of the same coin, two sides of the same coin. But first I'm going to start off about myself a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of my background, my time in the church, and then my subsequent atheism. So, I grew up in Georgia, right there. In Dougherty County. It's about 77,000 people. That's me. It was 71% black, my hometown. So I was raised a cultural Christian. I wasn't raised in church. I call myself a cultural Christian. I saw that Richard Dawkins also calls himself a cultural Christian. We actually use that differently. He says that because he grew up in the church and he pays reverence to that, his nostalgia for the music, songs, things like that, he sees it as being the same as cultural Jews, Actually, he calls himself a cultural Anglican, more specifically. But I don't disagree with how he uses the term, I just use it differently. I use cultural Christian the way that I was raised to use it. I wasn't a biblical Christian. I was raised in an American culture, which is Christian, and a black American culture, which is uber Christian. So I knew Jesus Christ, I thought, I believed in Jesus Christ. My mom said he was real. She was a Sunday to Sunday, churchgoer when she was growing up, and pretty much when she got out, she didn't really want to go, so we didn't go, but I did believe that God was real. My friends were all in church, and I was a little embarrassed about the fact that I wasn't in church, so whenever I was asked about what church I went to, I would lie about it and say I went to my great-grandmother's church, which was about an hour and a half away, but I couldn't lie and say I was in a church there because it was too close, 77,000 people, they'd find out. And I found out that my sister was just as embarrassed about being ostracized in the black community about that because she was lying too. I just found that out as an adult. So we were just talking about that, and she said, well, I used to do that, and we were like, okay, why did we do that? But it was because of the religiosity, the black identity, the black culture is wrapped up in Christianity. So if you're not that, it kind of feels weird. Most of my friends were Baptists or Jehovah's Witnesses, or I had a couple that were Muslims. They were Nation of Islam. And I had one friend that was Catholic. But pretty much everyone was in church. I'm sure there were people that weren't. We just didn't talk about that. You don't do that. So when I moved to Statesboro, Georgia, I went to college at Georgia Southern University. That's where I met my husband, Nathan. And he was raised a biblical Christian, So when I moved to Louisville in '98, after we got married, we jumped right into church. His family goes every Sunday, so that's what we did. I went from no church to every single Sunday I was at church. Every single Wednesday I was in Bible study. I led the children's ministry. I did the church finances, and I led several annual events for the church. The problem was I was not raised with the Bible, so when they started telling me what was in there, it didn't, no, it didn't resonate. I couldn't really get with the supernatural stories. I couldn't get with the genocide. I didn't understand it. So I decided to partition my brain, and I was just going to go with Jesus. I'm just going to be a Jesus lover. I'm not going to pay attention to the Old Testament. It's not real, or it's old. It's metaphor. It's not anything I have to pay attention to. But you cannot stick with Jesus, and you can't and say you're not sticking with supernatural stuff. I mean, he kind of had to die and come back to life. So I couldn't fully stick with that either. I would always talk with my husband about that because he was a deacon at our church. He started reading the Bible. I didn't read the Bible. I just kind of got what they gave me at church, the little sermons where they'd pull out this chunk, read it to you, and then try to apply it to today. That's about the extent of teaching. You don't get taught the history of Christianity. You don't get taught anything like that. You just get taught worship, devotion, that kind of stuff. So I had serious doubts. I had serious questions, and we talked back and forth about it. But eventually we had a friend of ours that came to our house, and he mentioned the Catholic Bible to me. And I didn't know they had a different set of books. And hearing that was like, well, who decided that? How does that work? So I decided, okay, I need to read this if I'm going to say that. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be a Christian. I need to understand this. So I went and I found the Modern Scholar series, and I did Judaism because I wanted to find out about why they had 73 books and we had 66. So I go back and I did the Modern Scholar lecture series on Judaism, and then I did the Modern Scholar lecture series on the early Christian church. 3 different ones. And that was really, really hard because when you find out just how much you've got these human hands all over this, then it starts to make sense that, oh, this isn't really real. And one day my husband, we're talking, and I noticed that he had stopped praying. We're fortunate that we both kind of were falling out of this at the same time. We were bouncing stuff off one another and talking about it. So, but one day I'm talking to him, and I said, what if, this isn't real? And what if that isn't real? And what if, and he goes, what if Jesus isn't real? And I'm like, I looked at him for a while like he had grown a second head. But it just kind of clicked. And that was it. There was no real fanfare. I could pretty much call myself an atheist at that point. I just thought, you know what, that now makes sense. Everything made sense at that point because if they made it up, then yeah, I get it. But I think having not been raised with the actual, not being fully indoctrinated, I think it's really it's really hard to accept those stories as an adult. I think you cannot go into a church at the age of 25 and learn about Jonah and the whale, or learn about, you just can't tell an adult. And plus, I used to pray when I was in church and ask God to give me faith. Seriously. I would pray for him to show me that he was actually working in people's lives in real time, because I didn't get it. So today I finally see that I was actually trying to pray away skepticism. Now how silly is that? So I began lurking around the atheist community at that point. I started reading Richard Dawkins. I read Sam Harris. I read Christopher Hitchens. I watched as many documentaries as I could get my hands on. I read Ehrman, Carrier. I stalked my Louisville Atheists and Freethinkers group for a long time before I actually got out and went. I was kind of apprehensive about going. And when I did go, it was wonderful. They were great, but I really was the only black person in there. And it was, a little disconcerting at first because you're coming out with this, thing where I'm stepping away from a culture that identifies your blackness in Christianity into this group. And it was kind of, it was a little bit difficult. So that is really my story as far as how I will tell you this as well. When I told my family about it, they did not act the way that I thought they were going to act. I really thought that they were going to freak out, and they were like, well, we love you anyway. That's just, who you are. So, and they know that I'm pretty out there anyway. So it wasn't a shock, I don't think. So I'm going to move on and talk about why I think black people are so religious. This is an op-ed presentation. Keep that in mind. These are completely opinions that I'm giving. Of course, you know indoctrination. Everybody knows that that's why people are what they are. They were indoctrinated that way. They were raised as Christians, so they believed it. But the other reason that black people are so religious is the elephant in the room. It's racism. Because you have this group of people who were brought here and put into hereditary chattel slavery together. To be surprised that they would cling to the religion that they get put together in this community is not very surprising, in my opinion. And I'm going to start with, that's a picture you see there. Our first African slaves arrived here in 1619, and we didn't actually start this country until about 150 years later. So the nation was very, very well into keeping these people segregated, and they had already begun. I mean, you're beginning a community already around what you believe. And then the emancipation takes place in 1863. We got the abolishment of slavery in 1865, 14th Amendment in 68, giving equal protection under the law. 1868. Who has equal protection under the law? Except me. And then 15th Amendment extended us voter rights, which we did not actually get until 1965, fully. So the point of this is to show you, I'm giving you these dates so that you can see that none of this actually happened when they were ratified. None of it. Black people were pretty much re-enslaved after 1865 using the black codes. Okay? I don't know, I'm pretty sure some of you have heard of the black codes. Right? So pretty much in the South, where they were concentrated, they began vagrancy laws, picking them up. If you didn't have papers to show that you worked for a white person, then you worked for me, pretty much. Okay, then you're re-enslaved. They pretty much forced you into labor. Peonage laws, same thing, debt servitude. If they walked up and said you had a debt to them, then you did. And that's pretty much what it was. And so you end up with all of these people on chain gangs and in convict leasing situations over and over and over and over again, from 1865 until 1942, when Roosevelt wrote the, hang on a second, I'm trying to go off my mind now and I can't do that. But Roosevelt signed circular number 3591 in 1942 to end forced labor, which approximated to slavery. Why? Because other countries kind of thought the United States needed to sit down during World War II, attempting to talk about what was happening in Germany. And they were like, look in your backyard. They were a little embarrassed by that, and so we got Circular 42, which they were at least making attempts at instituting, because that's why everything that happened in 1865, 68, and 70, it was not carried out. They just put those laws in place and then turned their backs. They walked away in 1877. The North went back. They were able to reinstitute everything that they did. In the meantime, you've got these black communities insulating, creating this culture around their religion. The religion of black people is not the religion of the white oppressor. That is not actually the Christianity that they follow. I know, we all know that there are 30,000 different denominations of Christianity around in the world. Black people took Christianity when they got it and did the exact same thing that everyone else does. They made it into something else. They made it into a religion of the downtrodden, like Jesus, low birth, like Jesus, redeemed. And that's what's being sought within black Christianity. It has nothing to do with why are black people so religious if this was the religion given to them by their oppressor. It's not that anymore. So that's not really what they're following. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the continuation of slavery well past the Civil War, well past the emancipation, the ratification of the 13th Amendment, you can pick up Slavery by Another Name. The Re-Enslavement of Black Americans from the Civil War to World War II by Douglas Blackman. It's a really, really good book. It's very eye-opening. But the Christianity initially sold, as I said, to black people about the better afterlife and all that stuff was not what they were following. It's not what they were doing. It was the poor, mistreated, yet redeemed Jesus. And then, I told you, in 1942, we got Circular 3591. Well, we rolled into, has anyone ever heard of Black liberation theology? Yes? Okay. Yes. I'm trying to show you the religion that they actually follow as to why you have the religiosity that you have. Black liberation theology calls for social activism to overturn white supremacy by analyzing the gospel of Jesus Christ in light of the experiences of blacks at the hands of white oppression. It was founded by this man, his name is James Cone, in 1960. That is wrapped up in what black Christians believe today as well. Cone explains, Cone explains that at the core of black liberation theology is an effort in a white-dominated society in which black has been defined as evil to make the gospel relevant to the life and struggles of American blacks and to help black people learn to love themselves. It's an attempt, he says, to teach people how to be both unapologetically black and Christian at the same time. So this culture, this identity is wrapped up in trying to overcome the oppression, trying to overcome the situation. And it's really, really, it's the culture. It's really hard to get out of something like that. Because when your identity is a part of something so, I guess, heinous, I would say, as what they went through from 1619 to today, I would say, honestly, to be honest with you. But we'll go into the civil rights era. We'll go into the 1960s, 1970s. You would create something like that. It was ripe for them to be able to do that. So it's not the white oppressor's religion. So when you talk to black people about that and you ask them, why are you so religious, given that it's not the same religion that they were initially given when they first arrived here. I'm sure you all remember Reverend Jeremiah Wright. Here, he's the retired senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ, and he was President Obama's pastor. And I'm sure you remember the sermons that they went through and combed through to find, things to be upset about. And he preaches pretty much his sermons are black liberation theology in a nutshell. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from the one that really got him in the most trouble, I think. But it kind of gives you an idea of what black liberation theology is talking about. Okay. Excuse me, I'm sorry. In the United States of America's government, when it came to treating her citizens of Indian descent fairly, she failed. She put them on reservations. When it came to treating her citizens of Japanese descent fairly, she failed. She put them in internment prison camps. When it came to treating her citizens of African descent fairly, America failed. She put them in chains. The government put them on slave quarters, put them on auction blocks, put them in cotton fields, put them in inferior schools, put them in substandard housing, put them in scientific experiments, put them in the lowest paying jobs, put them outside the equal protection of the law, kept them out of their racist bastions of higher education, and locked them into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3 strikes law, and then wants us to sing, God bless America. No, 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 not God bless America, God damn America. That's in the Bible, for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating our citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme. The United States government has failed the vast majority of her citizens of African descent. So that's pretty much what I know of church. That and I think a lot of black churches. They're not preaching an idea of, serve your master, you'll get a better afterlife. They're preaching tear down racist bastions of, he said higher education there, he was referring to universities, but tear down racist systems. Don't let those systems go. And pretty much, I'm sure you remember, that's what the civil rights movement was wrapped up in the black church was wrapped up in the civil rights movement for that reason. And that's where black liberation theology was born. I'm going to show you, I'm not going to get into this very much because I don't have a lot of time, but I want you to, I'm going to back up one. If you would check out The New Jim Crow, this book teaches you about the inequality that black people face in the criminal justice system through today. But it's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. And if you would also check out this documentary on Netflix. It's called 13th, and it's by Ava DuVernay. It explores the history of racial inequality in the United States. I just want to tell you guys about those just so that you can watch them, read them, and understand them. But they don't really go with the idea of why black people are so religious, but that does tell you why. Well, yes, it does. I take that back. People are still praying to get out of these situations as well. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, but then we turned around and were re-enslaved, and then we continue to be put in front of the justice system and receive unequal protection under the law, which was what the 14th Amendment was supposed to be, 1868. So that's not happening. And why black nonbelievers? I'll roll into that really quickly. Why black nonbelievers? Simply put, due to the shared history, the shared experiences that I think black people share sometimes, and it's not all black people, because when I came out as an atheist, I went straight into Louisville Atheists and Freethinkers. I was the only black person there, and I was completely accepted. I did not have any problems. But there are some people sometimes that want to be able to identify a little bit more with the experiences of the people that they're going to. Coming out of atheism, you all know, can be difficult. It's very difficult if you've got your identity wrapped up in it, the way that I think that black people actually do. So it's not to exclude anyone. We specify black so that black people know that they can come out too. I think a lot of black people are surprised. I've had people to tell me, gosh, I thought I was the only one. I didn't realize there were other, but that's why we make the call. Our organization does not discriminate in any way. As you can see, that is our statement. It's a nonprofit fellowship, and we have several white members. I think I have more white members in my Black Nonbelievers group than I do black members, because my friends, when I started it, they wanted to support me, and they all just jumped in and supported me to grab my numbers. So that is really the reason why Black Nonbelievers. We have spread. I know everyone has seen the Pew research that shows how we did not move at all between 07 and I think 14 on the religiosity scale, where everybody else kind of, did. We did move a little bit. There was a little tick. But we have 10 organizations now, all over. And I know Jim mentioned that he would like a tri-state Black Nonbelievers group in this area. So I see black people. Just kind of trying to put that out there. So, but anyway, that is pretty much all I have for this evening. We have a place in the black community. I'd like for Black Nonbelievers to be able to go out and do things. As Jim said, interfaith is fine. I don't mind, as long as you're not screaming, "You're going to hell," to me or something. I can work with you. We're fine. I don't mind doing things, activist things, social justice things. As long as we can work together, I'm good with that. But we deserve a place in the black community, and we deserve a place in the atheist community as well. So with that, oh, I forgot, I'm sorry. That's our mission. I jumped slides. Yeah, to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support nonbelievers in coming out, to promote atheist pride, and to organize nonbelievers for charitable causes. And with that, I say thank you.
Yes, I understand that my whole life is just a blink of an eye. The history of the earth is with each moment that goes by. But this moment that I'm with you, it feels like time Thank you so much.